For most of our lives, the economic rules have felt pretty simple, right? Low inflation, falling interest rates. But what if those rules are about to get completely torn up? Well, that's the incredibly bold thesis from economists Manoj Pradhan and Charles Goodhart. They're arguing that we are standing on the edge of a new economic era, one that will look nothing like the world we've known.
This one sentence right here is their core warning. It's a direct shot at this idea that things are just gonna, go back to normal. Pradhan and Goodhart believe that these massive fundamental forces around the globe are shifting, and the economic models we've been relying on for decades are totally blind to what's coming. The whole game is changing, and they're basically telling us to wake up and pay attention.
So to really get just how radical their vision of the future is, we have to first understand the past. Let's take a quick look at the world we've all grown so used to, this era of lower for longer. This chart pretty much captures the economic reality for decades. Just look at it. After the 2008 crisis, you can see that blue line, nominal interest rates, and the orange line, what we thought inflation would be, both just steadily drift down. This predictable, stable environment shaped literally everything, from how we invest to how governments borrow. This was normal.
So it's no surprise that the mainstream view, what you'll hear from a lot of central bankers, is that this recent spike in inflation was, just a temporary blip. They think once the dust settles from all the recent chaos, we're heading right back to that cozy, lower for longer world.
But here's where Pradhan and Goodhart just drop a bombshell. They challenge that whole idea with one profound question. What if the very forces that created that stable world haven't just disappeared? What if they've actually kicked into reverse?
And that reversal brings us to the absolute core of their argument, a massive demographic shift that is quietly but powerfully changing everything. This is the engine that they believe has completely stalled out.
Okay, this slide shows us the cause and the effect side by side. On the left, just look at how fertility rates in major economies have plunged way below that critical 2.1 number you need to replace your population. Now look to the right. That's the result. China's classic population pyramid is on track to completely collapse into a wine glass by the middle of the century. You're going to have this huge number of elderly folks being supported by a much, much smaller base of young workers.
And this massive structural change is captured by a really key metric, the dependency ratio. As that population wine glass starts to take shape, this ratio just skyrockets. It means you have fewer and fewer workers left to support a growing number of retirees. And that creates an incredible amount of strain on an economy.
So you might be thinking, if this demographic shift is so obvious, why don't the mainstream economic models predict a totally different future? Well, the authors argue it's because these models have two giant, multi-trillion-dollar blind spots. Let's dig into them.
This slide lays out the two competing worldviews perfectly. On the left, you've got the conventional wisdom. It says that as people get older, they save more for retirement, and all that saving keeps interest rates low. But Pradhan and Goodhart on the right are saying, whoa, hold on, you're missing the elephant in the room. They argue that this view totally ignores the massive government spending on healthcare and pensions for those same retirees, which creates enormous pressure that pushes interest rates up. And according to the authors, that conventional view is just flat out wrong because its models are blind to two huge real-world economic forces. Let's take a look at the first one. The first blind spot is public debt. Just look at this projection. It is staggering. Debt is set to just explode, and it's driven almost entirely by spending related to aging. The author's point is really simple. Any extra savings from individuals is going to be completely swamped by this massive tidal wave of government borrowing. The second blind spot is housing. It's the biggest asset for most families, right? It's a huge reason people save money. And crucially, the demand for housing is directly linked to demography. And yet, and this is kind of amazing, it's often just ignored in these big, fancy economic models. The authors argue that if you fail to account for the massive amount of capital needed for housing, you completely miscalculate the future pressures on interest rates. So, what happens when you combine these unstoppable demographic trends with mountains of government debt? Well, you get a new world order, one where the central banker is no longer the all-powerful figure they once were. This new world order is defined by a really powerful concept, fiscal dominance. It's basically the point where a government's debt is so huge that the central bank gets trapped. It can't raise interest rates to fight inflation because if it does, it might actually bankrupt the government itself. So in short, the government's need to spend starts to dominate what the central bank can do.
This slide lays out the whole causal chain, the trap that gets set. An aging population creates soaring debt. That debt puts central banks in an impossible spot. They are literally forced to choose. Do we fight inflation, or do we prevent a fiscal crisis? So which side wins? Well, the authors argue, politics will always choose fiscal stability. And that means higher inflation becomes a permanent part of the economy.
Pradhan and Goodhart put it bluntly. In this fight between a government that absolutely needs to keep spending and a central bank that needs to fight inflation, there's only going to be one winner.
And that is the world Pradhan and Goodhart describe, a world of structurally higher inflation, and because of that, higher interest rates. It's a world where central banks have really lost the authority they've had for decades. They become, in a word, unanchored. It's a really sobering thesis, one that flips decades of economic thinking completely on its head. It suggests that the stable, predictable world we knew wasn't the norm at all, but just a temporary demographic sweet spot that's now over. The glory days are gone. And that leaves us with the critical question: are we prepared for what comes next?